Good morning, and thank you for joining us at NASA's Wallops Flight Facility in Virginia, where just a few hours ago at 4:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Northrop Grumman's Antares rocket lifted off from here with its Cygnus spacecraft filled with about 7,400 pounds of cargo and crew supplies for the International Space Station. Here to tell you a little bit more about launch today, I'm joined by Joel Montalbano, International Space Station Program Manager, Deputy Director, Frank DeMauro, Vice President, Advanced Program Division, Northrop Grumman, and Kurt Eberly, Vice President, Antares, Northrop Grumman. We're going to begin today by a few comments from our speakers today, then turn it over for questions. Joel?
So what an outstanding launch. On behalf of the Space Station program, I want to thank the NASA Wallops team, the Northrop Grumman team, Virginia Space, all our international and domestic partners that made today's launch a great success. You know, as we celebrate 20 years of the International Space Station, one of the coolest things is the cooperation we have across the globe, the fact that people come together, you know, throughout, regardless of their backgrounds, and they make things work. And that has been, to me, one of the true successes of the International Space Station. So today's launch puts us on schedule for a capture of the Cygnus spacecraft at 5:20 Eastern Time, Monday morning. While we were waiting the weather out here in Wallops, we had an awesome progress launch out of Baikonur, Kazakhstan on Friday, and they're still planned to dock this Sunday at 2:30 Eastern Time. So we're looking forward to both vehicles being attached to the International Space Station and the crew working on them, getting the science, getting the research out, getting all the equipment that we've brought up on these vehicles, and continuing the great work we do on the International Space Station. Just a reminder, this spacecraft is bringing approximately 7,400 pounds of equipment on board. And so with that, again, I want to thank you, congratulate everyone on the successful launch, and I'll hand it over to Frank.
Thanks, Joel. I just want to add my thanks to our partners, Wallops Flight Facility, Virginia Space, Mars, and especially the Antares team. Not only was it a beautiful launch this morning and put Cygnus exactly where we wanted in orbit, but the Antares team worked through some tough elements this week, and your team really did a tremendous job, Kurt, so thank you for that. The spacecraft, after separation, we be able to communicate it extremely quickly and started commanding. We initialized the guidance system and the propulsion system. That all checked out really well. And then we began the process of deploying the solar arrays, which I'm happy to report have been successfully deployed and are generating lots and lots of power. So the spacecraft is extremely healthy, and it's ready to begin its trek to the ISS. We will now begin the process of raising our orbit as well as phasing the orbit to arrive just about at the space station in the early morning hours of coming up on Monday. As Joel said, we are planned to be captured at about 5:20 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, but the team will be on station several hours before that as we start doing our rendezvous preps and then eventually joint operations with the space station mission operations team. In the near term, we have our first orbit raising burn at 1:50 p.m. this afternoon Eastern Time. We'll have several of those over the next almost 48 hours. And the spacecraft's ready to go. The team in Dulles is ready to go. We will be connected with the mission ops team in Houston, and everything's set for that Monday rendezvous. So thanks again for the team, for the Space Station Program Office for having the faith in Cygnus and Antares, and we're looking forward to a great rendezvous Monday morning. And with that, I'll hand it over to Kurt.
Thanks, Frank. Well, it was a very successful Antares launch, and I understand we have some video, but first I'll make a few comments. It was a very smooth countdown leading up to launch, and we were able to launch right at the beginning of the window, which was our plan. So really no issues on the ground. The pad systems worked well. The vehicle systems worked well. We did have some telemetry issues with the stage one. You may have heard some discussion about not being able to see some of the stage one core telemetry issues. We had other confirmation from some ground sensors, and so we knew that there was this telemetry glitch occurring, and so we had waived a bunch of constraints. And then as we got into the final minute, there were a few more call-outs just related to the same issue, and so we just had to reconfirm that we had waived the telemetry monitoring of those constraints. We had other ways to monitor those parameters. So that all looked really good. I was watching the data on flyout, and It was very calm. There was very little steering. Everything looked right on track. The orbit ended up being 207 by 282 kilometers altitude, and then at 51.636 degrees. So that's right in the box of where we wanted to put Cygnus. So that's great. I'd just like to say we rolled out Monday night. It was raining. It was kind of sideways raining. Great job by our team, and the Virginia Spaceport folks really helped us out. Great job by them getting through that and staying right on schedule from the rollout through to being able to ready to launch on the original target, which was Thursday, and then we waved that off, and Thursday and Friday waved off due to weather. Glad we did. Beautiful day today. Great launch conditions. Perfect. 0% probability violation on the last weather call by the range weather officer, which you rarely see. So if we could roll the video of the launch. Can't see this enough times. And there we have ignition. We power up to 47%. We do a quick health check, and then we throttle up to 100%, coincident with releasing the rocket at the base and then retracting the umbilical mast, which is the transporter erector launcher. We go straight up for about 25 seconds before we pitch downrange in a southeasterly direction. We have C-band transponder that the range is tracking the whole time, so they know where we are. We also send down telemetry and inertial guidance from our navigator on board, which is keeping track of where we are. And I was watching the plot going down on the ground track. It was painting the line of where it was supposed to be, so just looked very calm. As you can see, very little motion. Great conditions for a launch. First stage burned for 3.5 minutes. At max Q, you may have seen the throttle back to 55%. That just reduces the structural loading on the vehicle as we go through that region of maximum dynamic pressure. And then we crank back up to 100% until we start getting light enough that we reach a G limit that we've agreed not to exceed with our Cygnus spacecraft. So we crank down the throttle there and kind of maintain steady Gs until we throttle down, and then we wait for the burnout indication. So after that, there's about a 30-second coast between stage 1 and stage 2. You may have seen it go dark if you were watching, and then stage 2 ignited, and that burned for another 2.5 minutes. Got into orbit, and we wait 2 minutes. There's a view of stage 2, I think, or maybe that's stage 1, the end of stage 1, I can't tell. Then we allow 2 minutes for settling after the stage 2 burns out, and then we separate Cygnus into orbit. So Frank, best of luck. Over to you. Hope you have a smooth rendezvous. I would like to recognize Frank Culbertson, who's in the audience here, who has decided to retire. He's the president of the Space Systems Group, and I just wanted to recognize him. We called him the corporate weather officer, and I will miss his presence, second-guessing the launch weather officer every step of the way. So I don't know how the range is going to survive without you, but we'll try to get by. So thank you, Frank.
I will now begin by taking your questions, and you can follow along using the hashtag AskNASA if you would like to ask questions this way. If you can, state your name and affiliation with your question, and we'll begin here.
Thank you. Jared Hayworth with WeReportSpace.com. Question for Kurt. I wanted to ask just for a little more detail on the waived constraints. How far in advance does the team, I guess, are they aware of an issue that they need a waiver, or is that decided right there in the moment, or do they know with some advance notice that they're likely to come up against something like that?
Well, it's something we've considered, and in our rehearsals, we've considered scenarios where certain telemetry systems go down for various portions of time. So we were prepared. We didn't know quite which of the ground systems it was that was causing the problem. We tried to reset the stage 1 core telemetry system, and that seemed to work, and then everything was looking stable after that. So that was about an hour out, where we then, but we knew that could go down again. And so we went and processed the waiver, having gone through and carefully looked at those points and knowing what other sources of data we had that was solid, that could give us confidence that the vehicle was in a good condition. We also have a series of automated constraints regarding stage 1 that are pressure switches that if we were not in the right parameters if we were not in limits on a number of parameters, then there would have been an automatic abort in that final auto sequencer, which starts at 3 minutes before launch.
Thank you.
Sure.
And we have a question here.
Thank you. Tarek Malik with Space.com for Joel. You mentioned the station's 20th anniversary coming up next week, and 20 years ago there were no commercial spacecraft visiting the International Station, and it's evolved into quite a large orbiting lab now. And I'm just kind of curious if you can touch on, this moment where you've had 2 different cargo ships launched in 2 different days, one commercial, one kind of a workhorse, and a new crew launch coming up in a couple of weeks, and then another private mission. I mean, it seems like the station itself has evolved over that time, and the state of spaceflight has. And I'm just curious what your insights might be kind of at this juncture. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. The commercial world, as we brought it into the International Space Station, has been a tremendous success. It's allowed NASA to bring on some partners that bring new rockets to the industry, bring new spacecraft to the industry, and it allows NASA to hand over that part of that work, that cargo delivery, so we can focus on going further and going past low Earth orbit. So to me, it's been a huge success. We've worked closely with our partners. Our partners have been flexible with us. We've been flexible with them. It's more of a family relationship. It's really been impressive to work together with the Northrop Grumman guys, the SpaceX guys. Soon we'll have Sierra Nevada bringing cargo. You mentioned the Boeing Corporation, and also SpaceX bringing crew next year. We're looking forward to that, and all these things are helping us enhance the International Space Station. So to me, it's been a huge success.
Hi, Jaren Chu from Boston. This was my first space flight in person with NASA Social, and it was a very impressive experience. A few minutes before launch, we all heard the announcement that there might have been some boat traffic. Just wondering what typically happens after that kind of traffic is detected, and what happened to the boat?
Yeah, that was... I can't speak for the range, although I'll try a little bit. The final launch poll is conducted at about 12 minutes. That's when the RSO, Range Safety Officer, who's responsible ultimately for the safety of the vehicle and the launch and the public, reported go pending, which means I go except for one thing, and she cited the boat. I think that was a VMRC, Virginia Marine Resources vessel that's used to help surveil the Back Bay area, and I think it just hadn't exited the hazard area quickly enough, and so I think she was just pointing out, hey, it's still in there, but I think they were on their way out. So it got quickly resolved, so I think they hightailed it out of there, and they went green, I think, within 2 minutes of that go pending call. So.
Give us a scare.
Yeah.
Ivan Couron of Agence France Presse. For Mr. Montalbano, there are 2 cargo ships and 3 crew. How much work is it going to be for them to unload so much material, and how much time is it going to take for them to do it?
So, from the cargo standpoint, we unload the cargo as needed. And so there are some critical items in each of the Cygnus spacecraft, as well as the Progress spacecraft, some critical science samples that will get unloaded first. We'll go ahead and use that, and then we'll continue to use the vehicles and unload them as necessary based on what the requirements are. So what the planners do is they balance all the science as well as the maintenance on board, as well as all the other activities, put it all together, come up with a timeline, and then we unload as necessary. So not an issue. We're ready to go do this. The crew's trained. They understand the constraints, and if there's questions, well, they have the ground to help them. So not an issue, and we're ready to go.
Sean Costello, Spaceflight Insider. Question for Kurt, please. The weather you acknowledged was fairly atrocious in the days leading up to this morning's successful launch. Can you tell me, did that expand the envelope of proven capability or sustainability to weather conditions? Is there anything that was experienced that you're now able to say was theoretical or expected, but is first experienced?
Yeah, I would say yes, because we debuted a new rain tarp over the front of the rocket when we rolled out, and it worked great. We had some previous incarnations. Last couple launches, we've experienced a little rain during a period when we're out there, the few days that we're out on the pad. So we had a tarp before that was susceptible to some wind damage, and so we built one that's more stout, and I think that worked very well this time. So kudos to our mechanical guys for getting that configured. I would say, very challenging conditions, but we're learning every time. Our crew here is very experienced. They have the right gear, and they're able to withstand the weather, and they just plowed right through. I think can't say enough about the spaceport folks. They were able to just keep working. We huddled up on Monday and looked at the weather report. Weather forecast was right on the money too from the launch weather officer here at the range. So we knew what we were getting into, and we decided to do it because we had at the time we had a good chance of launching on Thursday. It looked pretty benign that the front wasn't going to come that soon. And then of course once we got out there, got through all that, and went vertical and started our normal processing, the front started advancing. And that's when we lost our opportunity for Thursday, as that front arrived much sooner than we anticipated. Otherwise, it's always easy to second guess whether you should have rolled out or not, but that was our decision, was to roll out and go for that Thursday opportunity, which kind of went away. And then we had to weather what ended up being a significant nor'easter that produced a bunch of flooding on Chincoteague and on the island. But the pad came through great, very stout. The crew did well, so can't say enough about that. I think it does, to your point, I think it does inform us on our ability to withstand those kind of conditions in the future. Thank you. I will mention that starting with our next launch on NG-11, we are going to have a different concept of operations out there. We're actually going to go out a little earlier and go vertical, do our testing, and then we're going to come back down horizontal and move a mobile clean room over the front of the rocket. And we're going to be able to remove the nose cone of the fairing, and that's going to give us access to the Cygnus hatch, and we're going to be able to load cargo in then very late, 24 hours before launch, and then close everything up, go vertical, and launch. So that's a new con-op for us. I think it allows us a little more flexibility in terms of when we go out, because we're kind of off the critical path. The critical path will start when we do that final cargo load. So that's just next April 17th is when we're targeting that launch for right now. We'll see. And that'll be a new method of loading the final cargo.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Alan Williams, Zog 43 Rocket Newsletter. Quick question, and this kind of goes back to that answer you just had about late loads. Yesterday, I saw some guys on what I think is the tallest personnel lift I've ever seen, working up in the payload segment of the vehicle. Was that late loading, or was that some little thing that they were working on? And secondly, it was my impression that this is perhaps the first time that you've gotten the Antares off at the front end of a launch window for an individual day's launch. I may be wrong about that. I'm not trying to be smarmy about it. I'm just saying, because usually it slips towards the end. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, we did have some crew up there. They were checking on the rigging of the ECS duct that goes to the fairing, so that's what they were doing. We just had concerns about the winds and just inspecting everything and making sure it looks good in the final configuration. This was not the first time we launched right at the beginning of the window, but you're right, the last time we did push it to the end. And that's a degree of freedom we have. And actually, it's funny you mentioned it, when the RSO made the call about the boat in the area, I was immediately on the phone to our launch conductor saying, hey, why don't we just go to the end? And that just gives us 5 more minutes for them to exit the area. But they came back and said, no, it's nearly out now. It's going to be no problem. We're going to make it in plenty of time. So we just stayed on the front end. We've done that a couple of times, stayed on the front end. Yep.
Sean Costello, Spaceflight Insider. Question for Frank. Your Cygnus is the SS John Young. As you're commemorating John Young and all that he is there any corned beef involved in the payload to honor?
I'm not aware of any corned beef that we loaded.
I'm not aware of any either.
Corned beef sandwich.
Don't think so.
Sorry.
All right, well, thank you very much for joining us today. And as a reminder, on Monday, November 19th, Expedition 56 astronauts Serena Anand-Chancellor and Alexander Gerst of the European Space Agency will use the space station's robotic arm to grapple Cygnus about 5:20 a.m. and NASA television coverage will begin at 4 a.m. And with that, thank you very much for joining us for the launch at NASA Wallops Flight Facility, and have a good day.